This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. Here's your host, Corey Tusick.
This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Corey Tusick, and I have Jeff Booth with me. Jeff is big in the Bitcoin world, and thanks for coming in and sharing some of your knowledge. Also, Jeff's book, The Price of Tomorrow. I've got it right here. It's a great read, and I can say that, Jeff, because I asked when we did a Christmas exchange with my family on my wish list. That was the only thing I put, and I think my family thought I was joking, because I'm typically like, oh, don't buy me a gift, type thing. But I never read. Like I'm not known to be a reader. And, I'm an information, I like to learn. The internet's great for that. I'll read everything I can on there. But as far as books go, my family's always like, oh yeah, don't give him a book. He's a movie person, So when I asked for that, everybody thought I was joking. And my sister-in-law, had me and she got it for me. And they were all like looking at me on Christmas Eve, like, so you're really going to read a book? And I got like so excited, and I started telling them about deflationary monetary policy and all that kind of stuff. And their eyes glazed over. But I told them, I said, trust me, if it like, this is interesting once you get into it. So anybody that hasn't read Jeff's book, I strongly recommend it. But to start with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin definitely plays into all that. So I wanted to ask you a question about Bitcoin. Kind of, how do you explain it to somebody like they're 5? Maybe not 5, but like what I'm trying to do is gear towards a lot of newbies. I think there's going to be a big class of 2021 that joins Bitcoin. So I'm going across and asking a lot of people, like, what's Bitcoin in its simplest terms?
So in its simplest terms, I think the way into Bitcoin, and actually that's why the book probably helps, is it gives what is money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Money is just a trade on our time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a piece of that piece of paper. What does that mean? If you look at what the money in its simplest form is, it's a trade. You do something, you get paid for money, and you expect that money to be worth something later on.
Mm-hmm.
And so today money is being made up out of thin air, and that's destroying our time.
Mm-hmm.
And Bitcoin solves that. And Bitcoin solves that because it for the first time ever, it allows you to trust in code that can't be distorted, can't be manipulated. So it allows you to trust in a decentralized protocol that trust anybody based on the code. So in other words, Bitcoin, assuming it becomes monetary policy, and I think I highly believe it will, or things will be pegged to Bitcoin, then it gives us back our time. Is really what it does. Is it means nobody can manipulate our time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best messages of your book, is how valuable your time is. And I forget the term. I mean, it might have even been you, but people talk about time billionaire. Was it you that wrote?
I don't think I said that. I don't think I said that. But
yeah, you're being a time billionaire, and how much time you have, and so I see so much of that being robbed from everyone around us. And as I started to go down this rabbit hole, and you start to get your eyes open to what's going on, it's like, oh my God, this is terrifying what's happening. And everybody's asleep at the wheel. Nobody's paying attention. So I've been trying to, push as many people. And I think that understanding the deflation as being a need for the future is also a key component for what will get somebody beyond understanding Bitcoin as what it is to getting to understand why it's so important. And, do you see, like, as this inflation, in your book, you talk about how there is money printing and everything. And if anyone's listening to this and wants to trust Jeff's word, I read this book that you wrote it in 2018, right?
Yeah, 2019 I wrote it. 2020 I published it. Yeah, 2018, 2019 I wrote it. Yeah.
Well, if you read it in the COVID world, you would think you're predicting the future. Like you know, so many things that have happened because of with monetary policy because of COVID. I'm like reading it. I kept having to check. Like, wait a minute, did he write this book after COVID happened or before? We've just gone down this money printing hole, and so just talk a little bit about what the hamster wheel is that society's on, and the the wealth gap that's been getting further and further divided.
Yeah. And again, let's back up because it's so critical to understand Bitcoin to kind of understand the existing world we live in and why that's breaking down. Mm-hmm. And so from this, Bitcoin was a small paragraph at the end of the book because I wanted people to understand the real game board. So when you understand the game board, you can see all the next moves. So right now, a whole bunch of people on Twitter call me a time traveler because, and even predicting Elon Musk's buy of I predicted that, and people are calling Jeff Booth as a time traveler. But when you understand the game board, you understand all the next moves on the game board. Mm-hmm. And so let's just look at that game board. And first, a couple concepts for your audience that might not be aware. Inflation is just when goods and services get more expensive in relation to your money. There's no law that says we have to have inflation. It's a human construct to be able to concentrate power. But so there is no fundamental law of physics that says we have to have inflation. It's just all it means is goods and services get more expensive in relation to your money. In other words, your money is worth less.
No, like it's basically a tax on your money.
You could say a whole bunch of things. It's a hidden tax. But it's a hidden tax, and for the most wealthy, it's a gain. So, but let's just in that concept. It's a hidden tax on wages, really, is what that is. But it's just its most simple premise: goods and services get more expensive in relation to your money. Your money is worth less. But there's a whole bunch of people who believe it's a law; it must happen. Right? We have to have inflation. And on the other side of the coin, deflation is just when your money is worth more in relation to goods and services. And no law, the deflation or anything else either. It's just it's a construct. But we assume inflation good, deflation bad, right? And you'll hear theorists talk about economics theories, and it's just all bogus. It's just completely bogus if you actually go down to the first principle of it all. And then so take those two concepts: inflation, deflation, good or bad. In our own personal lives, we want to buy things cheaper, and we want abundance. We want more things for less. So that seems like a good thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we want everything else to go up in price, but our own stuff to go down. Right? It's not logical.
It's illogical.
But nobody asks the next question: why is that, and what does that look like? And so now you add technology to that mix, and technology is moving at a pace, and it's exponentially driving more efficiency. Every CEO, every person is using technology to increase their time. They're using technology to decrease labor and increase efficiency to be able to give more for less. Is that fair? Fair concept. Concept. Right. And no CEO I know, or no company I work with, uses technology to make costs go up and make performance go down.
Yeah. Right. That's a quick way to go out of business.
Exactly. A pretty logical concept, right?
Yeah.
So today you have technology moving exponentially, and it's moving more and more and more at a rate that is you know from the book, but at a rate we can't even comprehend how fast technology is moving. and you have innovation on top of that. So you have entrepreneurs wanting to give society more for less, which means deflation.
Mm-hmm.
So it means we should, if you let that happen, it means prices should keep falling, and our time should expand as they fall. So if you lost your job, you keep getting lower and lower costs, and our time should expand as jobs would naturally come out of society if more and more of the market is moving to technology. Seems pretty logical.
Mm-hmm.
And that path in a free market would just drive lower and lower costs. The air you breathe is free. Why? Because it's abundant. Your photos today are free. Why? Because they're abundant. And more of the things that you look in your phone, all of the stuff that's free on your phone, or almost free on your phone, is because it's abundant, because technology creates abundance. Yeah. And so everything I just said there seems pretty natural. It's like the world we're living in, and it seems like it should get cheaper and more abundant. So you would think that given exponential technology in our lives today and entrepreneurs trying to give society more for less, prices would keep falling, and they would keep falling, and things would be get cheaper and cheaper. And that's the thing I wanted to explore in my book, because I'd been talking about it for 10 years, but nobody seemed to be able to put the pieces together. Because that's logically what you would think would happen. And so if you assume that logic on kind of one side of the equation, that the prices should keep getting cheaper and we should be getting more for less, if you just let a free market work, there had to be something on the other side of that equation, on the inflationary side, preventing that abundance from reaching society, or broad-based gains from society. And when I looked at it, what you realized is there was over $185 trillion of additional debt in the last 20 years to be able to essentially stop that deflationary force. So when we think 185, so the total debt of the world, 250 trillion. This is before COVID. And an $80 trillion global economy before COVID, with 185 trillion of the 250 trillion coming in the last 20 years. Why would it come in the last 20 years? Why would it accelerate so much in the last 20 years? And it's because these two forces are bumping into each other, and technology is wanting to make things go cheaper. And governments need them to go up higher. So because if you look into there is no money backing it. It's debt backing it. And if you allow deflation to happen, the debt explodes in real costs, and it can't be paid back. So when you look at the problem on the face of it, and you go, oh my God, and that's when I said, when you understand the game board, you can, in predicting before COVID, this was happening before COVID. It was accelerating before COVID. COVID might accelerate both sides. Technology moving faster, and the response to it. But the game board is already cast in stone. It's and by the way, there is nothing governments can do in the end to stop technology from providing technological deflation. Nothing.
That's what I took away from your book, and I've been telling people, is that that there's really nothing. It's like, in a sense, I understand why they are doing the printing, because it's, from their perspective, it's going to, collapse the banks and all the things that they have going for them in their, ideal system. So it's logically, I understand why they're doing it. But I don't think they understand quite the harm, and also how it's necessary to transition to a new phase. And, like you said, you're getting your time back. And that's something that I've been, always a big proponent of, is, my life is not, I'm not like my life is about enjoying myself, being happy, and being with my family. And whenever I started in the movie business, I started off as a production assistant on big Hollywood productions, and like I was spending like 16 hours a day standing on my feet, making like $125, and it was miserable. But like for about 3 months, I rode the wave of like, oh my god, I'm on a cool movie, and then after that wore off, I was like, I looked around, I'm like, everybody here is miserable. Everybody here has spent their lives slaving away, I guess so that they can say they worked on a movie. That's why they want to be able to brag about that. But like nobody enjoys those hard days, the hard labor, the 15-hour days with no thanks or anything and little pay. I was like, I'd rather make less money, or find a way to make a livable wage and spend more time with my family. And then as I transitioned from that into the business end of it, I started figuring out, okay, what's the way that I can make the most money in the least amount of time? And that sounds like really selfish, whenever you think about it. But to me,
that's not selfish, by the way.
That's not.
It's not selfish at all. That's kind of what you should do. Like if you actually value your time, if your time is worth something, shouldn't you value your time?
Yeah. And it's funny that this advice came from a beer commercial. Whenever I was like in junior high, I remember seeing a beer commercial that said, if you're waiting for the weekends, aren't you just wasting 5/7 of your life?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like, it's like a 13-year-old that hit me like, whoa, like, yeah, I'm never doing that, So I was definitely never designed to be in a like everyday 9 to 5 job.
So did you drink beer 7 days a week?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I just went straight into beer 7 days a week. But I've been trying to explain to people after reading your book what, the simplest way, like, and tell me if I have this right with deflation, and why it should be this way. I said the reverse of inflation would make sense if, when I was growing up in the 1980s and early 90s, if the grocery store was full of automatic checkout lines, and that's how everybody checked out. But for some reason, you were now required to have a clerk checking your groceries and scanning your items. So then the grocer is going to say, okay, well, I have to raise the price of bread by 10 cents so that I can afford to pay for the cashier. And then for some reason, you have to have a bagger now.
Yeah, more people. That's exactly it.
And so I've been telling people, but now it's the opposite. We've done the reverse of that, where, you walk into the grocery store and it's mainly self-checkout and the prices have gone up. And like, that doesn't make sense. Like, you should actually the bread should be cheaper so that the person that doesn't have that job at the cash register doesn't have to have the pressure to have 2 jobs and just try to, keep their head above water. So do I have that right? Like, that's.
Yeah, pretty much. It's in simple examples. Sometimes people get but yes, that's largely right. When you think about it, though, when you're printing that much money, you're forcing prices to go up. So you said, let's back up to what you said before, because I think it's really important. We measure a system from the system we're living in. So all of the people's measurement devices of everything else, their houses, how much they need to live, what the world looks like, comes from the evidence they see in front of them from the system they live in. So if my rent went up from $1,500 to $2,000 a month because the government printed a whole bunch of money, I need to find a way to make an extra $500 a month to pay my rent. If my groceries went up for the same reason because the government printed up a bunch of money, I have to find a way to make that much more money. So if I own the house and the printing increased the value of the house and increased the value of the rent that I was getting, I'm pretty safe.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore you see what's happening. So so as you're printing money, you're distorting asset prices, you're distorting the market, and the people at the top that own the assets are the winners out of that, and they're picking the pockets of the losers. And then the losers come, not the losers, but the people working for wages.
Yeah.
Because inflation, the opposite side of inflation is wage deflation. It's the same coin, right? It's just the opposite side. In other words, my income went down without anybody telling me. My pocket was picked without anybody telling me. So the person that's working for $15 an hour is getting less income, because everything else is a higher price in relation to their income. So you're picking the pocket from a whole bunch of the population and giving it to the rich. And then those people that you're picking the pocket from, when you see this giant inequality, it gets worse and worse and worse. It just gets perpetually worse, and it has to get worse. Mathematically, it has to get worse once you start.
Yeah.
And so then those people say, I'm going to vote somebody else in who's going to redistribute that to me. And typically that person that's going to say is that redistribute it does this. Because they can't stop the game board. They have to keep printing. So they have to keep this. And so what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to artificially keep prices going even higher. And then, so let's just use an example of housing. I'm going to make sure housing prices go up, and then I'm going to give it so all the rents go up with it. So then I can give these people some more money that I shouldn't have to anyways, right? To pay for the artificially high prices. And nobody's asking where the money comes from. The money is coming from inflation, and money is coming from hurting the people that need it the most. That's and so you divide society, and it feeds back on itself. Monopoly is a good framework for this. If you pick up all the assets, if you win the game board early, imagine you go to jail on the first one, and then you go to one of their utilities, then you go back to jail and everything else. So somebody else picks up all the assets. You can't win that game.
Yeah, you're going to go broke.
You go broke. So what you can see is kind of luck and timing have a lot to do with picking up those assets. Now imagine, so now play that game over and over again. Now imagine that game doesn't end. It never ends. The winners keep getting, the prices just keep going up and up and up, but the game can't reset. And the losers, how long are they going to play the game
before they realize,
before they burn the game down? And what we're seeing in society is that happening, because the game is rigged. Now the other side of that coin is what you said is, when we say they, they is we.
All of us.
We vote in that they even Fed, everything else. We have a say and who we vote in, and we're voting in people saying the exact same thing on the same system with no way to fix the system. So they is we. So what? But if you said that, even let's use they, what would you do? It's you have all the control. What do you do? There is no money. It's debt. In bonds today, there's 130 trillion bonds with negative real rate returns. 130 trillion of negative real. So you guarantee the safest place. Normally, bonds, treasury bills are the safest return. 130 trillion global bonds that you guarantee to lose money if everything goes well.
That's insane.
It's insane. And so you're guaranteed to lose money if everything goes well. And at the same time, it can't go well because governments have to print more money to be able to escape that trap. So
basically at this point, they just don't want to be the one that's holding the bomb when it goes off.
But what's going off for sure. Right.
So you're like, I just hope that we can delay it till the next guy's in.
Everybody on top of that. So when you manipulate currencies to that degree and manipulate interest rates to that degree, and you're printing money to that degree. So first, let's go. What if they let it all fail? What if there's nothing backing it? There's nothing backing it. So there's counterparty risk all the way down to the sand.
Mm-hmm.
Everything fails. Institutions, banks, education,
Anarchy.
medical, everything fails. There's nothing there. And it just keeps on unwinding, and then it gets rebuilt on the other side, but there is nothing there, and so that would be pretty staggering societal collapse globally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so now if you're sitting in the Fed and you're sitting or Senate or EU or anyone else printing this money, what are you doing? You're trying to convince citizens you have it under control, and you keep printing. And you have to print more and more and more and more and more, which is escalating the real problem, the inequality and everything else. But you're trapped into this, and you have to and you're trying, the amount that they're going to have to print to overcome inflation. So the minute they take off the gas of printing, deflationary spiral.
And it'll just go down. The prices will go down. Everything will go down.
Everything goes down. But so the amount of printing has to keep going up. Like everybody's talking about $1.9 trillion now and the stimulus bill.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what happens after that stimulus is spent mostly on paying for groceries that are already artificially high priced, and housing that is artificially high priced, and to pay back loans of student loans that are already baked. It's not going to drive the economy.
No.
There's no gain to the economy. It's just kicking the can down the road. And so the next stimulus bill has to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And if that wasn't enough, the people are looking in silos, like that's happening only in the US. It's happening in Japan, it's happening in China, it's happening in Euro, and all of that stimulus is just, it's not a free market. It's all warped prices everywhere, but we're living in a system of warped prices and we can't see it. Now on the Bitcoin side, if $130 trillion or thereabouts, it's more than that, but is negative yielding bonds, and people are starting to realize the safest place to store money was always that, but it normally had an interest rate. And now it doesn't, and it's not safe. Some of that money is leaving that system and going to Bitcoin.
And that'll slowly, then, like they say, slowly then suddenly.
Yeah, because as more and more people realize what this system looks like and what it means, and is moving over to Bitcoin, that's going to move faster and faster. Now, what should happen to the existing system? As money leaves this system and moves into Bitcoin, because it's actually a safer instrument. It doesn't seem safe because this has always been safe, but it is a safer instrument. And as more people realize it's the safe instrument instead of an asymmetric bet, this starts moving faster and faster. Now, what do central banks do? They have to print more. Because if they don't print more, interest rates spike to try to hold money there. And if interest rates spike, the entire economy collapses. So that's what the game board looks like. And what it should look like is totally different. But we're inside this game board today, and
we can't change it.
We can't change it. I personally believe that Bitcoin, and some people talk about, so I'm a huge proponent, I was before I wrote my book, but I didn't want to write my book about Bitcoin. I want to write a book in a way, is there another way out? And I've still looked everywhere. Is there another way out other than this? I do not believe that anymore. I believe that Bitcoin is the least risky transition path for the world. Because if it happens slowly enough, more and more people can accumulate it, and it transitions.
There's less and less pain.
Less pain for society.
Yeah, that's what I have been thinking. I've floated the theory out to people. I've said, and it's funny that you mentioned people thought you were a time traveler. Is that I said, maybe Satoshi was a or somebody from the future.
He's a time traveler.
Yeah. and they sent it back through the ether, through the digital realm, and plop this down at the perfect time to be because the more I study it, and I've been studying it for a while now, but like intensely for a year, the more I get into it, I'm like, this is the antidote. This is the key. There is no perfect system there's no perfect transition, I should say. The system as it's structured, the software is impeccable, but transitioning from, fiat standard to Bitcoin standard, there will be some pain, but it'll, to me, be necessary for a brighter future. And, whenever you talk about like how it starts pulling the money over. So that's where you predict that Elon Musk was going to put money in, right? I mean,
he has to. Like I wrote it. So Elon talks about the climate, right? Or that's why it exists. Nobody asked this. The climate problem cannot be solved from the existing system. Impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Because the innovation that's bringing on clean energy is now cheaper than dirty energy.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning more and more deflation is coming. And even if you argued it's not quite cheaper yet with battery storage and everything else, it will be cheaper.
Oh yeah.
So today you have solar additive energy to the grid that is coming in at a lower cost than the grid price, than former energy. And more all over the world, it's exploding. It's a tiny portion of the overall energy infrastructure right now, and it's not like we could go to solar tomorrow. But what's happening is it's additive. And it's at a lower price, and it's getting lower every year. And I'm just using one instance of solar. A whole bunch of other technologies are doing the same thing: battery power, everything else. And so what you're having is new energy coming on lower to the overall supply, which means that should be deflationary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And clean. That's what nature should do. It should get cheaper. And energy is the number one input of everything else. So why do you think the US needed low cost energy and Saudi Arabia and everything else? It was about the economic machine have an advantage in energy price to be able to run the economic machine. And that's what created the war machine, to be able to secure this. Now energy is getting cheaper. And it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper on a scale. And it doesn't matter if it happens tomorrow, next day. It's not like people think about this light switch with one day we'll have free energy. It makes no difference. The path is deflationary and will be more deflationary. And that path is the number one input of everything else we do. So it means it means most of the deflation that I'm talking about is looking backwards. And looking forwards, we have exponentially more coming. So if we keep the existing system of monetary policy, all of the innovation, everyone's saying clean energy, we're going to spend more on clean energy.
Yeah, they're always going to spend
more money. I'm going to create a whole bunch more money to make sure prices keep going up, to essentially invalidate all of the innovation that's coming, because prices have to keep going up in an existing system. So nothing can be so there. People talk about Bitcoin mining being consuming energy. It is the thing that actually fixes the world. The existing system cannot solve climate change.
Yeah,
it is the biggest cause of climate change, because you have to have more forever.
You have to have more cars on the road, more gas burning, more
gas burning, more, and higher prices forever on an exponential trend, kind of against nature,
Mm-hmm.
to keep the system running. And so people don't even put those two things together.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because it's kind of how my personal life is moving. Like, we're right now we have two young children, and our house we're too small at this point. You know what I mean? Like, it was the first house we bought when we got married. We're like, okay, we got to go somewhere. And now, I want to get out, like, and buy acres of land, and my wife always wanted to have, some animals and stuff. So we're, getting further away from the city, and I'm getting into this Bitcoin world and everything. And like you said, you can't necessarily, and there's not a light switch where it's like, oh, I can have a solar farm that powers my house. But as I started getting into Bitcoin, um, I started, like, tweeting, or, like, DMing random people that I saw talk about using renewable energy to mine Bitcoin. Um, and that's fascinating to me, because I think that that's, the innovation will lead towards a better solution, because if it's cheaper to mine Bitcoin using renewable energy, then it's ultimately going to lead that way. So I started talking to these people, and I'm going to buy a rig. I just want to test it and see how it works. But the guy's telling me, he said, I have the solar, and he's telling me everything to use. And he's like, I don't power my house. He's like, heat,
Yeah.
he's like, I live in Scotland, and we get enough sun to power my house. And, I don't have to pay for heat or electric, and it's completely free. And, and it's kind of funny. It's turned me into, and I think this is one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin, is that it's turned me into even more of an advocate for the environment, where beforehand, like, to be honest, I just was always like, well, yeah, you shouldn't litter. Littering's bad. You should always lean on the side of clean. But, like, to me, it was kind of like, I don't know the answer. I don't know how we're going to get out of this. And even, like, with electric cars, I was like, where do you think the electricity comes from for that car? Like, so in my mind, I was like, it's a zero sum game, because you're getting coal powered electricity that's going to power your electric car. You're just pushing the emissions somewhere else in the world.
So what you're saying, and this is really a key construct in all the businesses that I look at, the timing in businesses when you can create a structural change. There's a lot of people who believe an innovation and that costs more can make it through, and it can't. So, but because the market votes, and the market always looks for the cheapest price, because their business requires it too.
Mm-hmm.
So you can create an incentive, and let's use a government incentive to be able to regulation to be able to take something at a higher price. But a lot of times, when you're dealing with a global phenomenon, another government will cheat, because
Mm-hmm.
it gives them an incentive. When I say cheat, I just mean price matters a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But
they'll lower their price to beat you.
Exactly, they'll lower their price to beat you. That's actually what's happening in currencies today. U.S. is trying to lower their currency value, and then labor comes back to the U.S. China's trying to lower their currency value to lower their labor cost and everything else. And you have this. When I said that $15 an hour is actually going down,
Yeah,
that's what's happening, and people are racing. I need those jobs.
Yeah,
even though they're shitty jobs, and they're going to go away anyways, because we work in a different system. But price matters a lot. And what's happened for a long time in solar and everything else, and this was what price just keeps declining, and now it's an advantage.
mm-hmm.
Now the economic incentive is driving it, because it becomes an advantage. And what you just said about Bitcoin is a search for Bitcoin mining is a desperate search to have an advantage in lower energy cost. So those things are driving together. Bitcoin mining is doing flare gas projects, which just used to have gas going into the off the oil fields, had to flare gas, and there was no economic value for it. Now Bitcoin mining is putting projects onto flare gas to be able to capture it to mine the Bitcoin, because there's economic value there. So it's actually now at a wave where where it starts to reinforce both clean and
Yeah.
green and Bitcoin, because the economics and incentives are aligned for to be able to drive it. That's what's happening.
And that's what I think. I mean, it sounds like, you're like hyperbole, or just, you're so excited and such a Bitcoin maximalist that you'll say this, that I would say this, but I think it could end up being one of the most important inventions in the history of the world, because
I laugh at that.
Yeah.
Because I put that on a Twitter post. I put it. I think it's humanity's greatest invention, and NBC posted it, and the number of people that kind of went after me on that.
Oh, I'm sure they were.
But it's that big a deal. We've never had an ability to trust money, and instead of trust a government to tell us what money was.
Mm-hmm.
We've never had and that changes everything. It changed. If people actually knew what was happening, kind of layer 2 on Bitcoin, what was happening on the contract stuff on Bitcoin, it changed. It's like the printing press. I'm sure people didn't realize the printing press was going to be one of humanity's greatest inventions either. Mm-hmm. Because, oh great, what does that do? But it democratized power. Like the
flow of information was
ideas. Anybody could create their idea, and it could move out to anybody else, and that created the scientific revolution and everything else, and it a massive change that built on top of that innovation. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin's the same. What's coming on top of this innovation is staggering.
Yeah, I think that I think we're going to see the wealth gap close. I think we're going to see quality of life go up. This is just me predicting what I think, from my very amateur view. But I think the quality of life is going to go up. I'm going to think that our time is going to become more abundant. And the earth ultimately will be, cleaner, better place to live. Happiness goes up, and
you're looking past what is bound to happen in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
In the short term, there is, it's going to be messy. Mm-hmm. The transition, governments haven't figured out how, so if you think about this, where do you could call them rogue states, but where do politicians get their power from in a command and control? Like, where does politicians get their power from in China or Russia? From manipulating money.
Yeah.
Right.
From money.
From control. And so China is not going to adopt the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Individual Chinese will. Individual people will. But China itself, that's why they're racing to create the digital yuan.
Because they're trying to
because it creates control. Mm-hmm. And look at what just happened in Hong Kong. Look at what they're trying to do. Kind of that geopolitical risk, but if you could argue it on the other side, so is U.S. in a different way, but U.S. is more of a free market. But in Hong Kong, you can't get out and you can't get your money out now.
You're stuck.
You're stuck. So if you had Bitcoin, you could.
That's the only way.
And it tells you, all of these governments around are signaling why you better buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Why you better have it as a lifeboat, because that's what they have to do. They have to control the currency to control you, and those on the paradigm. On one end of that paradigm is a free market where prices go down,
mm-hmm.
And individual kind of sovereignty. Yes, there will be taxes. Yes, government. A different type of state will emerge,
mm-hmm.
to aggregate rule of law and everything else. And then on the other end of that spectrum is control by the biggest thug. Because if you manipulate money, there is no free market. And if you keep doing that, you're essentially trusting somebody else to control you. and we know how that ends, right? You see it throughout history what that looks like. So I that fight of our times is in front of us, and that's I suspect that the U.S. is probably too late already to stop this, but they'll regulate Bitcoin in a way that actually is the best way for them for the U.S. To be able to make the transition. And I suspect that other countries will be slow to that, like China, be slow to that because of what it means to their currencies.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. You do think that the U.S. is like, my theory on it is, Steve Jobs said, to stay on top, you have to cannibalize yourself. And I kind of think, the U.S. was the dominant, dollar. Obviously, everything was pegged to them. So do you think for them to stay on top, they've got to jump on it before anybody else does?
That's what I think is going to happen. That's I think the innovation will. That's what I think. The innovation, it will come out of there, and the entrepreneurs. If you think about the U.S. kind of founding father principles of the Constitution, everything else. In fact, even into money, this problem in your Constitution, money has to be fully backed by gold.
Yeah.
And it's not at all. Yeah. But in the because it's such a big deal, and it always has been a big deal. People consolidate power and change the rules of rules of money, and so even today, but the U.S. Constitution is around individual sovereignty, is around free market, everything else. So if there's a country that is most likely to realize that, and to, even though it changes the rules a whole lot of what it used to look like, I suspect the U.S. will be leading this charge.
Yeah, and I was excited to see, a lot of the new people coming in that are pro crypto in the U.S. Yeah. I think that's a very positive sign, and they don't want to give up that power, and they know that, if they don't do it, somebody else is. And so it's a matter of who's going to adopt it first, I think. What do you think the timeline looks like? Like we were talking about the bright future that we're looking at, but the rough period of transition. How long do you think? How do you see that playing out?
Oh, that's hard to say, because there's just so many variables on because the geopolitical risk is the biggest one. Mm-hmm. What ends up happening, you can see this in the US today. Most people aren't having the conversation you and I are having. Most people aren't having the conversation that my book tried to drive. Most people believe in the rhetoric of the existing system, and it's their fault, or it's their fault, right? Mm-hmm. And you get, when society turns like that, it turns into a powder keg. Mm-hmm. And you consolidate power through trying to consolidate enough people to believe in your message that it's those other people's fault, whether it's the rich, whether it's the poor, whether it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
It's a total, that it's none of that. It's caused by a different thing that we could easily get by if we faced the first principles of this and said what's actually happening. But I understand how you can consolidate power by blaming somebody else. We want to belong. Mm-hmm. If I said to you, if I said, hey Corey, you and I get this, nobody else gets it. We're a little club. You want to, it feels like I belong, right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, Bitcoin community does it too. But Bitcoin community, I would say that and so it seems exclusionary because we know better. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's what in Bitcoin people have to stop doing.
Yeah, is the arrogance, or turning people off.
Exactly, because they need to invite more people in faster. That's the best thing. But again, that us versus them is real. And once you get this far away, people don't want to listen. Mm-hmm. Right. So in the political cycle, it's like people screaming into a vortex on both sides, and nobody can even hear the other message, which both are wrong.
Yeah. I know.
That's a crazy thing. Both are wrong. It's like, it's useless changing an actor in the system. It won't change it at all.
Oh yeah. I've been telling people I feel like I'm insane because like I'm like looking at both sides. I'm like, nobody's right here. What's going on?
So, but once you consolidate enough power in that, you need a bigger enemy, and that enemy is typically outside of your borders to
Yep.
create to create kind of look over here. That's the problem. And so that geopolitical, if you asked what fears, what I'm most worried about, it's that geopolitical risk in a transition, creating
Some kind of war.
some type of war. That war would look different today than it would have in World War II, because it was technology has changed the rules there too. But it's still, you can start to see those things happening on a global stage if you open your eyes. You can feel it happening on a global stage if you're looking at or if you see it if you're looking at the signposts, and that's what's happening. Yeah. So to me, the faster that Bitcoin kind of moves and into this, at some sort of pace, essentially defunds that. Right.
It makes their money worthless.
Yeah, one of the things that, but again, they could still, there's still a lot of control. This is a long way from over. But one of the things, even my dad and my dad and I, and a whole bunch of in the Bitcoin community, or people that look at Bitcoin, don't really understand it as much, kind of they're worried about, is great. Now you just have new people at the top of the ladder. That now you've changed the rich from here to here, and now nothing's changed. And that couldn't be more away from the truth. And it's because that's what actually my dad believed too. And I said, Dad, if just take me, or it's not true in this case, but let's say I had 1 million Bitcoin, and I had them, and I could consolidate a whole bunch of power through that Bitcoin, and I could hire an army and everything else. Every time, the longer I did that, the more power I did and hired an army in a Bitcoin world, the more I'm distributing my Bitcoin.
Yeah, you're losing your power.
I'm losing my power. So the more power, the more power that I try to artificially gain, rather than giving value to other people, the more I lose my power.
Yeah. So the only way really
the only way to gain power is to give value to other people.
And yeah, once you get to Bitcoin, people go, oh, what are you going to do whenever, we won't be here for 2140, but what do you do then? It's like, well, you get free cash flows, you buy businesses that create value for other people, and that's how you accumulate more.
The only way you win is creating more value. And if you don't create more value, you lose value. And but at the same time, prices are coming down the entire time.
Yeah.
It fixes so many things. It's so hard to see though, because again, and I'm not saying it doesn't sound like it's hard for you to see. You read the book, you went through, you've kind of gone down the rabbit hole. But for a lot of people that are just entering this, Bitcoin seems like a scary place.
Oh yeah, it's it's terrifying, and to understand it. But I will tell people that are listening that I think that the Bitcoin community is more welcoming than the average community out there. But I do agree with you. I think there is this, you need to be able to kind of have more open arms that's standing at the front.
Bitcoin Twitter specifically, and some of the people that give back on there, and your podcast, whole bunch of other, Preston's podcast, Peter's, like just Marty Bent. There's so many people in this community, Breedlove, that are incredible people that actually care and are willing to first principles discuss what does this look like. But actually, I don't know if it's actually hard to believe all of this information is free.
Yeah. And
for anybody to go as far as they want, and so people they're doing just an incredible job out there and it's making the whole community smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter. It's not one person gains. It's not one person that says it all. It's the entire community is getting smarter as a result of pressure testing ideas on every attack vector, on every, and so so yes, and I think what ends up happening is those people have gone through that pressure test so much that somebody new comes and asks us a question that goes,
Mm-hmm.
"Are you kidding me? Like that's the stupidest thing I've said." Not realizing that they might have asked the same question 4 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. That's that's why I was like, whenever I was thinking about doing, a podcast, and really the podcast for me is my own like deeper understanding of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's the purpose for doing it. But I thought it could be of value to other people. And I thought, outside of acronyms, people, it's like if you don't understand an acronym, just Google it, you'll get it, like you'll find it. So I'm not going to explain things like simply to people for an acronym, just Google it. But because there's FUD, there's all the different things that are out there that you can quickly get lost in. Um, but yeah, I mean, it can be intimidating to see you hop right into Bitcoin Twitter and the conversations that are happening. If you've not been in there, you're like, whoa, what does this mean? What are these people talking about? It's like it goes from like these complex economic theories to like talking about citadels and having your castle behind a wall. And I think, what's going on here? Like I spun around real quick. So yeah, I think that but I will endorse the Bitcoin community in general, and that everybody here is very approachable, and don't be afraid to ask dumb questions, because that's been my role of life, is I just never act like something's going to be a dumb question, because you don't know unless you ask. And this is how you go down the rabbit hole and get that deeper understanding to get to the point where I started off thinking, oh, like Bitcoin, that'll be really cool, number will go up, it's going to make a lot of money. But once you rapidly go down, and I have to credit you guys, and a lot of the people you mentioned, whenever the reason I actually first put money in was because of the COVID. And whenever they started talking about printing money, I thought, okay, that's a bad idea. I should put my money in something that can store value. So I started learning about it after I'd put in the initial amount. And then when I learned about quantitative easing, and you guys, all talking about that and understanding that this printing has been happening since 2008, I mean, I literally went all in. It was like, yeah. I guess it's a meme within the community of sell your chairs. Yeah. But I was like,
well, do you know why sell your chair is a meme within the community?
No.
So it's you wouldn't buy chairs. So the IMF thinks you need inflation, because otherwise no one will buy chairs. So they created a video that effectively inflation is required, because otherwise if deflation happens, people wouldn't buy things, and then more things would fail, and then so people wouldn't buy chairs, right? So that's where that meme comes from. It's it's an IMF video.
Yeah, that's my thought behind it was sell my chairs so that I could buy more Bitcoin, because to me. So what do you think happens, for example, the US adopts Bitcoin, but like right now you have people that invest in real estate, and like that's one of the things that I'm looking for, outside of storing value in Bitcoin. I'm like, ooh, there's some vacation properties, like buy those, in 30 years they'll go up exponentially based on the inflation. But now I'm learning, like, oh, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe it's going to go down.
So this is timing, and these things are completely different systems. If Bitcoin becomes a standard, and I think it will be, everything according to Bitcoin will come down in price, including real estate. It will absorb. So I talked about the 130 trillion in bonds that shouldn't be, and that's mispriced. So the entire stack on top of that, businesses mispriced, housing mispriced, everything mispriced, adds up to about 550 trillion. Divide 21 million by 550 trillion, and forget about the actual dollars, because people talk about $1 million Bitcoin, $5 million. Forget about the actual dollars. Think about purchasing power. So purchasing power today is based on 550 trillion or so, and divide that by 21 million. That's purchasing power of every Bitcoin
in the future.
In the future, is if what I just said happens, I don't see how it doesn't. On the way there. So real estate, if money keeps printing for, let's imagine money prints for another 5 years, which it probably has to, or another 2 years, or another 1 year. At some point, that has to break, right? But if you looked at what I said before, $185 trillion has been created out of thin air in the last 20 years. What would your real estate be worth if $185 trillion wasn't created out of thin air in the last 20 years?
The same as you bought it?
Way less, right? It would be like, so.
Yeah,
so,
it would depreciate like a car.
Exactly. It would depreciate, right? It wouldn't look like it does. So now ask, will you print another 185 trillion in the next 10 years, or 200 trillion in the next, maybe. But if you do that, that means more divide to society. That means politicians are going to get elected and try to tax your asset at a different rate to be able to redivide wealth. That means that the people on the bottom that are, the rents are going up because your real estate's going up so much, are going to go and take it back or burn it down. So real estate becomes a tail risk in that because of the system. So to me, at the very top of all asset classes is Bitcoin, because I think it will outperform everything. I don't think that there are some other asset classes that will do well, and everything else as a result of trying to print money into this. But the very top, I think, now, if somebody's going all in on Bitcoin, just think Jeff could be wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think I am. I think I've gone every attack vector and everything else, and I feel really confident in saying that. But the whole thing in Bitcoin, or the community, verify, don't trust. You should not take what I'm saying as gospel. You should do your own homework. But if you come to that conclusion too, then you might think, wow, the real risk is the other assets I hold, the other stuff I hold, and this might be the least risky.
That's what I thought. With real estate, I'm like, okay, say I buy a beach property or something. In the standard, theory would be, hold on to it for 30 years and then sell it for an insane profit, because it's going to go up. But that's
just finish that though, or stop there, because it's important for your audience. Why is that? Because
why would it go up?
Yeah, we've lived in that world where it always goes up. Our parents have, their parents have, we have, and we hear everyone around us levering real estate, and it always goes up over the long term. We have a bias that always goes up over the long term without looking at why does it always go up. It always goes up because we have an inflationary monetary policy that pushes it up, and we'll print money at ever-ending numbers to be able to make sure it always goes up. That's why. So if you believe that can continue, buy real estate everywhere and go all in on real estate. If you don't believe that can continue, maybe pull back a little bit on real estate, have your personal residence or something else, and think about where you could change your scenario.
Yeah, that's what. And even with buying like a new house, I mean, I'm not sure what it's like in Canada, but in the States here, the housing market has gone crazy. The prices for houses are soaring through the roof, and I'm like, I wish that the people are like, oh, that means you'll get more for your house. I'm like, yeah, but we're like upgrading, so that's a net loss for me. Like, I wish it would go down. But my fear is like, well, what if we buy this summer and then all of a sudden the price is going to go down? I mean, I'm hedging it, I guess, with Bitcoin, so I should be safe. But
40% of all dollars that were ever created were created last year.
That is
of course, housing is going up.
Yeah.
Right. When it's not really going up, it's going up in dollars that are going down.
Yeah, the value isn't changing. It's
and the big thing when we started this conversation about that is all of that is robbing your time. Because what you think is, I need to work more to be able to pay for that higher price. Well, your wages are actually going down against it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You don't need to work more.
It's just a grand illusion, but we live in that grand illusion, and that's the way the system runs today. And so it's really hard. These are hard concepts for people to even get. I'd say one thing I love about the Bitcoin community, or a lot of people in the Bitcoin, they're insanely curious. They're actually open, really curious people without a yes, once you get there, there's a total belief. But even under the total belief, it's fact based, and they're willing to be wrong if they're kind of see evidence somewhere else. So you have in fact, one of the things that when I say about Bitcoin Twitter and the people on that are some of the best people on that, it's the open minded. It's a real curiosity that I love. It's just it's just fantastic.
Yeah, that's the thirst for knowledge in the Bitcoin community. It's never ending. And it's kind of like it's inspiring because it gives you that feeling that there's no problem that can't be solved.
Yeah.
Because there's smart people that you look at. I even look at Elon Musk. He's coming in, he's buying Bitcoin, and all the things that he's put his money into. And years ago, I was like, why would he really want to go to Mars? Like that's crazy. But now, you're like, well, this plan is a little crazy. What if he develops a system out there? I mean, obviously, way in the future, but like you start thinking about these forward-thinking things, and I think that that's something that Bitcoin does to people. Is it helps you accelerate your forward thinking. It makes you. I mean, I think it makes you healthier. People end up being healthier. I've noticed. A lot of people say that you end up spending more time doing stuff you love and less time slaving away. And yeah, I think that there's just a greater appreciation. That's what I've noticed. And even now, like me in the movie business, I'm trying to think of a more efficient way that everything can be done. Like Bitcoin is the ultimate efficiency machine. And how can everything get ripped down to the studs and made to work as efficiently as that? And I haven't figured out a way where I haven't figured out something that totally makes it more valuable than putting your money into Bitcoin yet. Because anytime I come up with an idea and then I'm like, yeah, but why would you part with your Bitcoin for that? Like, so you have to create the value to be, oh yeah, that's why you would do it. That's going to increase.
Yeah. So where is the business value? And that business value, that's what every entrepreneur knows. The only way to create value is to create value for somebody else. Otherwise, your business fails. And so that whole process should be deflationary.
Yeah, it should cost less. Actually, there could be a case study maybe for the movie business because it used to cost so much money. You had to fly to locations, you had to shoot on film, you had to the special effects were all practical.
But take that example, and why do you think we have so much? It's not just how many people are in the movie business; it's the amount of content that's gone through the roof because it's cheaper to do it. That has enabled us to watch more content. So now you have content effectively, and it's not free, but it's almost free everywhere. Amazon monetizes that content through their own engine that brings more people to the web, and they give it as a Prime membership, right? So everything is based on that same. Every industry is experiencing that same thing because it's getting so efficient. And you're talking about the efficiency today. The efficiency going forward explodes.
Yeah. The what's the theory that you reference in the book? I forget the name. How everything gets exponentially faster, right? It's funny. I think a lot of people that no matter what industry, if you're finance, movies, wherever you come from, we all have the same first principles mindset of like in college, I was like we're doing like like we had to do a topic, public speaking, had to come up with anything to talk about. And so I talked about how, it took X number of years to invent the light bulb, billions of years for humanity to invent the light bulb. And then in 100 years, we went from the light bulb to Wi-Fi. It's like that. I think that's going to keep going. What's the theory in the book? I forget the name off the top of my head.
Do you
The
mean
exponential growth.
just Moore's law?
Yeah, Moore's law. Yeah.
Yeah. So in Moore's law, whether it's still alive and well, but if it can, I'll give you a thought. Today, right now, I have an idea for something. Let's say a chair. Let's use that example because we already used that.
Yeah.
I have an idea for a new chair, a really good chair. So what do I do? I'm not going to make it in my backyard. I'm going to draw a picture. Might use a computer. Then I'm going to make a prototype. It's going to be really costly to make that prototype because I have to make it locally. And then I'm going to test that in the market. And then if people say, wow, I really like that chair, then I'm going to ship that prototype to China. I'm going to produce it at scale. I'm going to all those jobs in China, that all of my thinking and everything else, I'm going to take that chair and I'm going to put it through a distribution to distribution, ships across the ocean, transportation, distribution. Then that distribution is going to send it to the store. Then the store is going to send it to people's houses. I build marketing engines, everything else on top to sell my chair, my idea. Mm-hmm. What is that chair? It's a piece of information in my head. It's an idea. It's just information. It's information in atoms that are reformulated in my idea, that are reformulated, and a whole bunch of cost to be able to get to you. And a whole bunch. That idea is moving into the information streams of the web. That idea just looks like information. And pretty soon, you'll be able to 3D print that chair. Within 10 years, you'll be able to 3D print that chair in your house. My idea to your house without any of the other cost.
Deflationary.
And so when you think about these things and all of those jobs and all of the structure that we come to rely on, and it's just an idea. It's an idea. It's information. It's just it's information. And then on top of that, AI is going to come in and make those ideas better than my idea. Right. Yeah. So to believe we can live in an inflationary world against that backdrop of what's coming is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. The world requires a currency that allows for deflation. Bitcoin is that currency, and in time we'll see it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to leave it. And I guess you've kind of answered this question, but the one way I like to leave it off would be, for people, there's a lot of people getting into Bitcoin now. I mean, I'm sure you have a bunch of, friends and family reaching out to you, and even me, I've been getting people like, hey, what app should I use? What would you say to people who feel like it's too late? Bitcoin's 52,000, it's too late.
We're in the first inning. If you're buying, don't buy to flip and hold and acquire it, flip it and trade it and everything else. If you're buying, you might buy it high, it might drop, and then it'll go higher again. But don't worry about the day-to-day trading. Don't look at the day-to-day trading. Buy it if you have if you understand what the game board looks like, and you've done your own research down to the sand on what the game board looks like, then I would say it's almost crazy not to have some, even as a life raft, again, away from the existing with the storm that's coming, and just hold it.
Just hodl.
And beyond that sum, as you understand it more, you might want to acquire more. But that's everybody's own risk tolerance, what it looks like for them. I don't believe it's a risky asset. I believe it's an asymmetric bet. But I'm also not buying it to try to so that I have. It's not about money for me. Mm-hmm. For me, for me, it's about fixing a structure that is inherently unjust, and it cannot continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm for too. It's power to the people, that's
Right.
it's really what it is.
Yeah.
All right, well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks, Corey.
Thanks again to Jeff for joining me. That was a great conversation. I really enjoyed Jeff's insight and in his deflationary monetary policy as being the only way forward. It's fascinating to once you start going down that rabbit hole, and then also to see how Bitcoin does kind of match up with that and is kind of the escape hatch. So I strongly recommend his book. His book is The Price of Tomorrow. You can find it anywhere, books are sold, Amazon and so forth. And it'll really, really open your eyes to why prices shouldn't be going up and why we should be getting more of our time back. So, thanks again to Jeff for coming on, and thank you guys for listening. Catch you later.